Hello and welcome to this Premium Tut series Tumblr Theming 101. In this video we're going to review the markup we've already created for our theme, as well as patching up and fixing a few of our post type issues. We're also going to think about the markup we're going to need to actually style this theme and think about the CSS. So as I mentioned, we're just going to go quickly over the markup we have already created. Just go into Firebook. So as I mentioned, so go back to design. And as I stated, before we started creating the markup, the way I see this design is I see it having two zones. We have this sidebar, and then we have this main. So what we've done, or what I've done, is I've used the aside element here, and I've used the main element here. Now inside the aside element, we've got details about the blog, the portrait photo, blog title, the description, the pages, and then finally the Twitter feed, which we'll add in a later video. In the main element, we have all of our posts. Each of our posts has its own footer, which we've created. And then finally, we have the pagination. The only thing we haven't added is the actual copyright information, which again, we will do in a later video. So for the time being, let's just have a quick look at the markup. So again, here's our aside, here's our main, here are all of our posts, and here's the close of the main. So there were a few questions that we still need to decide on. There are a few things we still need to decide on with this theme. Now the first was where the links in the footer were actually going to link to. Now as mentioned, it's possible for these to go one or two places. So when we created the footer, we discussed that the time ago and the notes and the tags can actually link to one of two places. It is possible for the time ago to actually link to a page populated with posts created on the same day. Also, with the note count, it's possible for that to either be in action and add a note count, or to link to the notes section on the permalink page. And then finally, with the tags, we could either link to other posts with the same tag, or we could just link to the tag section on the permalink page. Now, with this theme, I think the sensible idea would be to have the time to link to the permalink page, so the individual post, the notes to link to the notes section on the permalink page, so the individual post page, and then finally the tags, they will just link to the permalink page. Oh no, sorry, the tags, they will actually just link to other posts with the same tag. At the moment, there isn't any clear way to actually get to the full single article. So when I say full article, Tumblr has the option to truncate your posts for the index page, which you can see here in this design. Now this is something called the read more option, and it's something that is user invoked. So it's not something specific that you set in the theme. It's something that the user does when they create their post, and then they can increase. Well, basically what they do is they put this read more line into their content, and wherever this divider goes in the content, that will create a read more link. So then you would have the truncated post on the index page, and then when you clicked on the read more link, you would get the full post on the permalink page. So that really at the moment is the only way to get to a permalink page. So by making the time and the notes linked to the permalink page, we're also creating a few more avenues for us to allow the user to get to the full page. If you go to your markup and you go to the article element, inside the article element, after all your post logics, so this is all your post logic here, here's your footer. Now remember we added the like button, the relog button, and then we added a unordered list with the details for the post. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the documentation and we're going to go to the section for posts, I believe. Okay, and then underneath posts, underneath the post tag we've already used, we have something called permalink. Now, permalink will be the permalink for the post. So this is the link to display the post on its own. So just this one post. And what I'm going to do with time ago is I'm just going to put in the variable of permalink. Now, again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the label with permalink, but as I said, I would like this to actually link to the notes section on the permalink page. Now, we haven't actually created the markup for this notes section, and we are going to cover the permalink page in a later video. So we will do that once we've done some CSS. This is kind of my process. I try and get as much markup done in one go, and then I will come back to the markup and fix up any things or add any things that I've missed. So we're going to add this permalink, and then we're just going to have a look quickly for the notes. You can see here's a note. Now, the notes themselves, if I remember correctly, they actually use classes, so we can't actually link to that with an ID. So when we create the section for our post notes, we'll actually have to give that an ID, and I'm just going to give this an ID of notes. So what will happen is when we load the permalink page, it will jump to the section with the ID of notes. So then the user can jump down to the notes. Now, finally, the tags are already set up to work the way we want. So the tags will actually, when clicked, return all posts with the same tag. So that's great there. You could, however, if you wanted to, you could actually include another option here with a link to the post itself. So rather than hijacking the time ago and the notes, you could actually include a short link here in the documentation. Again, it's under posts. We have the option for a permalink, and then we have an option for a short URL. So we could actually display this minified URL in our post details if we wanted to. If we wanted to make it a bit more clear that the user needs to click on this to view the view the full post even. So that's the footer and the details sorted out. Now, the only remaining thing really was to work out what we were going to do with the chat. If we remember, just have a quick look at the markup here. So remember, the chat will go through and create a ordered list and then an li for each line in the chat. That line would have a span with the person having the conversation's name and then the text that that user is having, or the text that that user spoke. Now, when I'm coding the CSS for this, what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to create the li at full width, and then the span will float to the right. And then what I'll end up doing usually is I'll actually set a min width or a max width on this span, so that what will happen is we will actually push the content and this will appear. So the spans will have a minimum width like so, and then every single line of the conversation starts at the same point. So in terms of actually trying to replicate this design with the markup we've got, we should be okay. Again, the markup can change, and if you want to do this differently to how I've done, feel free. It's the theme operators and the logic and how we loop and use the conditions that is the important part of this series. So far, so good. That is all the markup created based on the design we currently have, apart from some JavaScript stuff and a footer. Whilst we mention it, we might as well do the footer right now. So for me, the footer would go underneath the pagination element, and again, I'm going to use the footer like so. because this makes sense to me. In terms of markup, I would expect to see the footer element here because it's the footer of the main element, not the footer of the article element. And we'll just have a look at the design very quickly. We have two text elements. So I'll include the markup for them. The first, I'm going to give a class of copyright. And then the second, I'm just going to give a class of Tumblr. Now, the reason I'm giving a class of Tumblr is because it's just a little stamp to say powered by Tumblr. So if we go to the documentation, there is actually something we can use here. And I apologize for in so much. There is actually something we can use for the copyright information. There we go. So it's under the basic variables and it's called copyright years. Now what this will do, it'll display the span of years your blog has existed. And as you can see in the design, the span of years of the blog has existed. So what we'll do inside this paragraph element for copyright, we're just going to include the variable name copyright years. I think that's correct. Okay. And then we're going to also include the blog title. So space and then title. Now, again, because this title isn't inside any block loop, it'll return the blog title. Whereas if it was inside, say, the blog post, blog title, blog post, blog text, blog title, it'd return the title of the text post. And then finally, we'll just put in powered by Tumblr. So that is the footer taken care of as well. As we are finishing up the markup, we might as well just concentrate on the markup for the permalink page. Now, as mentioned, a permalink page is a single post direct page. So whereas you have your index and you have index page 2, page 3, page 4, etc., etc., a permalink page is an individual, a unique URL to a specific post. Now, usually on a permalink page, you would have something like a comment system, you would have something like a share system or something like that. For this theme, we're just going to include the notes that Tumblr supplies by default. Now, Tumblr notes is a collection of likes and reblocks, and you can get a visual example of who's liked an individual post and who's reblogged an individual post. I also believe that people can actually make a comment when they reblog a individual post, and that comment will actually appear in the post notes. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go to documentation, and we're going to look for notes. There we go. So two things. Post notes, their actual list of notes only ever appears on the permalink page, whereas a note count or post notes count would appear on the index and the permalink page. And secondly, because this is out of the post loop, so to speak, because this is out of, no, sorry, I'm trying to write this. Because this is actually part of the post, I would like to conclude it inside the article itself. So I think for the notes need to have the rest of the article in the same element to actually make sense. So if you, for instance, took away the article element and just had the post notes element, the post notes don't have any context. Whereas if we include the post notes inside the article element itself, then they have context. So rather than creating an element outside of the article like we did with the pagination, what we're going to do is we're going to create an element inside, underneath the footer. So on the design, underneath the footer, I would like to have some post notes displayed on the permalink page. So what we'll do is, again, there is a check. So block post notes, so it will check to see if there's any post notes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a section element again, because it is a section of this article, and then I'm going to give it a class of post notes. No, sorry, actually, ignore that. I'm going to actually give it an ID of notes. Now, the reason I've given an ID of notes is because our note count links to the permalink page and a section or an element with the ID of notes. So when somebody clicks on the link to the note count, it's going to jump down to this section and display the post note straight away. Secondly, the reason I've not given it a class of notes is because post notes are a little bit odd, as in the way they are returned. You basically include one variable like you would do for the audio embed, and then Tumblr will then generate an ordered list of notes for you. And that ordered list of notes itself has the class of notes. So when we write the CSS, we're actually going to write CSS for the ID notes and then CSS for the nested class of notes. Again, it's a little bit messy, but it's one of those things we can't avoid. What we're going to do here is we have three options for the post notes. We can just use post notes, or we can use post notes -16. Now, this will display the avatars of the people who liked or reblogged this particular post. It's 16 pixels by 16 pixels. And then finally, we're going to use, we can use post notes -64. Again, the same, but the avatars are 64 by 64. Now, I'm just going to use post note 64 because I think that having some big avatars would be quite nice, and include that variable inside. So that's the post notes cleared up. Now again, as per the example, just to mention that the post notes need to be inside the blog posts because it is related to a post, if that makes sense. So remember that blog posts always will loop through each individual post and do something inside for that individual post. So what we need to do is we need to load the post notes. So the same way as like post type would return quote, photo, video, etc. for each of the post types, we also actually have to do that for the post notes as well, even though they're only actually returned on the permalink page. Now, as far as I'm aware, that is the rest of the markup we need for our theme in terms of layout and content. Now, we have quite a bit more to add to this theme, but this relates to customization options. So we'll cover that after we've actually styled this theme. So that concludes this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will join me in the next one where we'll actually make a start on writing the CSS for this theme.